Have you ever had that strange feeling like you're playing a role in your own life? You smile when you don't want to. You agree just to avoid conflict. You say yes when deep down every part of you wants to scream no. And the strangest part, you don't even realize you're doing it until one day you stop and ask yourself, whose life am I really living? This isn't about being fake. It's about survival. From the moment we're born, we're taught to fit in, to be liked, to make others comfortable, even if it costs us our own comfort. But what if that's the very reason you feel empty? What if the life you've carefully built, the one everyone seems to admire, is actually a mask? In this story, we're going to pull that mask off, not with anger, not with blame, but with awareness, honesty, and maybe a little courage. Because buried beneath all the approval you've chased is the real you waiting to be seen. The trap of approval. Have you ever known exactly what you wanted and yet still found yourself doing the opposite? You hesitate, second guess yourself, hold your tongue, not because it's the right thing to do, but because you're worried what people will think. You dress a certain way, speak a certain way, hide parts of yourself, not to stay true to who you are, but to avoid disapproval. The truth is, whether we admit it or not, we all want to be liked. We all seek approval. It's human. And that's where the trap begins. Society doesn't really want you to be yourself. It wants you to be acceptable, adaptable, predictable. From the time we're kids, we're taught a simple formula. Be good, follow the rules, don't make waves, and in return, you'll get love, praise, and belonging. Slowly, without realizing it, we begin to trade authenticity for acceptance. We start to believe that our worth is measured by how others see us. We chase validation. We perform. We play roles. And here's the real cost. The more you try to be accepted, the more disconnected you become from yourself. Your choices stop reflecting your truth. Your life becomes a performance, one carefully crafted to avoid criticism, rejection, or discomfort. You smile when you're breaking inside. You say yes when everything in you wants to scream no. You become a hostage to other people's opinions. Carl Jung saw this clearly. He said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But how can you become yourself if you're always busy being who the world wants you to be? That's the quiet tragedy of approval seeking. It creates a mask, a version of you designed to survive, not to live. And the longer you wear that mask, the more real it starts to feel. You forget who you were before the world told you who to be. Even worse, the parts of you that don't fit the mask, your fears, your anger, your wild dreams, they get buried, pushed into the shadow. And as that shadow grows, your authenticity fades. Here's the painful paradox. The more you try to please others, the more you betray yourself. The more you chase approval, the more you reject your truth. And in doing so, you lose your greatest strength, the courage to be real. But here's the good news. Once you become aware of the trap, everything can change. In this journey, we're going to explore how. You'll discover why some people are more vulnerable to approval seeking than others. You'll understand the psychology behind the masks we wear. And most importantly, you'll learn how to take that mask off piece by piece until you meet the real you again. It's not an easy path. In fact, it takes real courage. Because let's face it, people will always have opinions. But the question is, do you want to be accepted or do you want to be free? The two don't always go hand in hand. Why some people struggle more than others? Have you ever wondered why some people seem to need approval, like oxygen, while others can walk their path without flinching, even when criticized? It's not just about confidence, and it's not just about life experience. There's something deeper going on beneath the surface, something Carl Jung understood better than most. According to Jung, every person has a psychological type, a natural orientation toward how they perceive and interact with the world. At the broadest level, some people are introverts, others are extroverts, but that's just the beginning. He also described 4 core psychological functions: thinking, logical, analytical feeling, Values-driven emotional sensing, focused on details and reality intuition, future-oriented imaginative. Each of us has a unique combination of these functions, and depending on how they show up in your personality, you may be more or less likely to fall into the approval trap. Take someone whose dominant function is extroverted feeling. This type of person naturally scans the emotional environment, always tuned into what others are feeling, needing, expecting. Their inner compass is shaped by social feedback. They may ask themselves, is this okay to say? Will they still like me if I speak up? What do they want me to be? And while this sensitivity can make them caring and empathetic, it also makes them deeply vulnerable to rejection. Their sense of worth becomes tied to how others respond to them, which is terrifying because people are unpredictable. What earns you approval today might get you judged tomorrow. Now compare that to someone with a dominant, introverted thinking function. They're not necessarily seeking approval. In fact, they may not even want attention, but they have their own trap. They overthink. They hesitate to share ideas unless they're perfect. They censor themselves out of fear of being misunderstood or dismissed. In both cases, whether it's the urge to please or the fear of being seen, the result is the same. You hold yourself back. You silence your voice. You let the world shape your identity instead of living from your core. That's the real danger. Because the longer you live according to what others expect, the more your brain gets used to that pattern. It becomes automatic. You don't even realize you're doing it anymore. Eventually, your self-worth becomes conditional. You only feel enough when others say so. And that's how you become a prisoner. But here's the thing. Your psychological type is not your fate. It's not a life sentence. It's a roadmap. When you understand how you're wired, you gain the power to break the cycle. You can recognize the patterns that keep you trapped in approval seeking. You can start saying no when your instincts scream, yes, be nice. You can speak your truth even when it shakes a few opinions. Most importantly, you can begin to separate who you are from what others think you should be. Because here's the hard truth. No matter how hard you try, you will never please everyone. It's impossible. And every time you twist yourself to fit someone else's expectations, you lose a piece of yourself. One little compromise at a time. Over the years, those little compromises become a life you barely recognize. So what's the first step to freedom self-awareness? Not blame, not shame, just noticing. Where in your life do you tend to bend? Where do you hold back just to keep the peace? Once you start seeing it, you can start changing it. You can begin to live from yourself, not for others. And that's where everything begins to shift. But there's more. Because even when you recognize the pattern, something inside still resists. Something keeps pulling you back into the role, the image, the performance. That something has a name. It's the mask you've worn for so long you've forgotten it's a mask. And in the next part, we'll talk about exactly that. The persona, how it forms, why it traps you, and how to finally take it off. The persona, the mask you forgot. You were wearing, let's talk about the mask. Not the one you wear at work or at formal events. Not the polite smile at awkward dinners. I'm talking about the deep invisible mask, the one you've worn for so long, you actually believe it's you. Carl Jung called it the persona, a kind of psychological armor we all put on to function in society. And here's the thing, it's not a bad thing. We all need a persona to survive. You can't just walk in every room saying exactly what you think or doing whatever you feel. We need roles, student, parent, partner, leader, because they help us navigate the world. The persona becomes a bridge between our inner self and the outer world. But here's where it gets dangerous when you start identifying with the mask, when you believe the role is the real you. That's when things begin to fall apart inside. What starts as a tool becomes a trap. You act confident even when you're falling apart. You play the nice one, the reliable one, the funny one, the strong one. But it's not because you are those things. It's because the mask says you should be. And the more people applaud the performance, the harder it becomes to step out of it. Ask yourself, how many times have you said yes just to keep someone happy? hid your opinion to avoid conflict, smiled when you wanted to scream. Every one of those moments reinforces the persona and buries the authentic you a little deeper. You start living for the applause, for the compliments, for the safety of fitting in. But inside, something feels off. You feel disconnected, tired, like you're always on stage, because you are. And here's the hard truth. As long as you're spending energy maintaining this image, you'll never feel truly free. Freedom requires truth, and truth, real, raw, honest truth, often disappoints people. It challenges the image they have of you. It shakes the roles you've always played. But that's part of the journey. To be free, you must be willing to disappoint the persona, to let it crack, to say things that might make people uncomfortable, to stop pretending. That doesn't mean being reckless or unkind. It means being real. Jung believed that the path to becoming your true self, what he called individuation, can only begin when you realize you are not the mask. Until that moment, you're just trying to live up to an illusion. The persona keeps you on edge, constantly scanning the room. Do they like me? Did I say the right thing? Am I who they expect me to be? It's exhausting, and worst of all, it keeps you from ever relaxing into who you really are. But if the persona is the mask, what's behind it? That's where it gets even more interesting. Because behind the mask lies something most of us are terrified to face. Something messy, raw, unfiltered, honest. It's the part of you you've hidden away for years, maybe even your whole life. And Jung had a name for that too, the shadow. Everything you've repressed, denied, or disowned ends up there. And it's the next step on this journey back to yourself. So in the next part, we'll go even deeper. We'll explore the shadow, what it really is, why it holds so much power over you, and how facing it might be the most important thing you'll ever do. Because here's the truth. You can't be whole if you're only showing half of yourself. The journey back to yourself individuation. So now you know the mask isn't you. But what happens when you finally take it off? What do you find underneath? At first, probably a lot of confusion, some fear, and maybe even pain. That's because the real you, the one beneath the performance, has been buried for a long time, under years of expectations, roles, and survival strategies. Carl Jung called the process of uncovering that real self-individuation. It's not just self-awareness. It's a deep, often uncomfortable transformation where you stop trying to become what the world wants and start becoming who you really are. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. Because the version of you that most people know, it was built for approval, it was trained to be safe, accepted, and predictable, and now you're about to break that version apart. That takes guts, because on the road to becoming real, you're going to have to disappoint a few people. You might rattle your relationships. You might outgrow a job, a circle, a version of yourself you've clung to for years. And most terrifying of all, you might have to admit that the life you built wasn't truly yours, not entirely. So you ask, why do it? Because the alternative is worse. To keep wearing the mask is to slowly drift away from your own soul, to live a life that feels numb, performative, empty. You might look successful, you might seem happy, but inside something aches. That's the ache of the authentic self calling out to be seen. Individuation is how you answer that call. It's not a one-time decision. It's a path, a daily process of unlearning and remembering, of peeling away layers that don't belong to you. You'll begin to notice when you say things just to please, when you stay silent just to avoid rocking the boat, when your smile feels heavy like a lie, and you'll start choosing differently. You'll say no when you mean no. You'll say yes only when it aligns with your soul. You'll stop filtering yourself to fit into rooms that were never meant for you. But here's the part no one tells you. Individuation comes with grief. You grieve the roles you played. You grieve the connections you lose along the way. And sometimes you grieve the comfort of being liked. But that grief is sacred because it clears the space for something better. Wholeness, not perfection, not popularity, just wholeness where all parts of you are allowed to exist. You don't have to be the smartest, the nicest, the strongest, or the most lovable. You just have to be true. And that's what individuation gives you. A life that's no longer borrowed, no longer rehearsed. A life that feels yours. But there's a catch. There's one more thing standing in your way. Even when you're ready to live your truth, something inside still holds you back. It whispers doubts. It floods you with guilt. It warns if they saw the real you, they wouldn't accept you. That voice doesn't come from your persona. It comes from somewhere darker. It's the part of you you've spent a lifetime avoiding. It's your shadow. And until you face it, you'll never be fully free. In the next part, we'll go there. We'll dive into the shadow. We'll explore what it is, why it scares you, and how it's actually the key to your healing. Because the truth is this: you can't become whole if you're still afraid of yourself. The shadow facing what you've been running from. So far, we've talked about the mask you wear, the persona. We've talked about how to take it off and begin the journey back to your real self. But there's something hiding behind that mask. Something deeper, darker, more personal. It's the part of you that you don't want to admit exists. The part you avoid, deny silence. Carl Jung called it the shadow. And here's what makes the shadow so powerful and so dangerous. It's made up of everything you refuse to see in yourself. Not just the bad stuff, not just your anger, envy, selfishness, or shame, but also your power, your desires, your voice, your full emotional range, the things that were once punished, rejected, or made to feel too much. These parts didn't disappear. You just pushed them underground. And now they live in the basement of your psyche, quietly shaping your behavior from the dark. You see, the more you repress something, the more it controls you. You try to be calm but explode over small things. You try to be kind but secretly resentful. You try to be confident but constantly compare yourself. That's the shadow at work. And here's the painful link. The deeper your shadow, the more approval you'll chase. Why? Because deep down you're terrified that if people saw what's really inside, they'd reject you. So you cover it up. You overcompensate. You become nice, helpful, harmless. You play roles that feel safe and hide the parts of you that feel dangerous. But here's the truth. The shadow isn't the enemy. It's a missing piece of you. It holds not just your suppressed flaws, but your buried power, your honesty, your wildness, your aliveness. Facing your shadow isn't about giving in to your worst impulses. It's about finally acknowledging them, owning them, letting them inform you instead of unconsciously control you. It's the difference between acting out your anger and understanding where it comes from, between sabotaging relationships and recognizing the wounded part of you that fears being left. Shadow work is not comfortable. It will make you cringe. It will show you things you wish weren't true, but it will also make you whole. Because here's the secret. You cannot fully love yourself if you're only loving the acceptable parts. You have to love the messy parts too, the needy parts, the jealous parts, the insecure, impulsive, reactive parts. When you say to those parts, I see you, I accept you, you are part of me, something incredible happens. The fear of being found out begins to fade. You stop hiding, you stop performing, because suddenly you don't have anything to prove. You're not living in fear of being exposed, because there's nothing left to hide. That's freedom. Real freedom isn't about becoming bulletproof. It's about becoming whole, not needing approval because you've already approved of yourself. This doesn't happen in a day. It's a process, a conversation with the parts of you you've ignored for years. But it's a conversation worth having. And in the next part, we'll look at someone who lived this journey out loud. Someone who stared his own shadow in the face and walked away transformed. Carl Jung himself. We'll dive into the story of how he broke away from Freud, faced public rejection, and birthed a whole new vision of the psyche because he chose truth over approval. That story is more than history. It's a roadmap. When theory becomes life, Jung's break from Freud, everything we've talked about so far, the persona, the shadow, the longing to be accepted, these weren't just abstract theories for Carl Jung. He lived them. And one of the most defining moments of his life was also one of his most painful. It was the moment he chose to break away from the one person he admired most, Sigmund Freud. At the time, Freud wasn't just another thinker. He was the figurehead of a revolution in psychology. He was respected, influential, and considered the father of psychoanalysis. Jung, he was the rising star, Freud's protege, seen by many as the one who would carry Freud's legacy forward. But over time, something began to shift. Jung started to feel the limits of Freud's worldview. Freud believed the core of human psychology was rooted in sexuality and repressed desire. Jung disagreed. He felt that the psyche was much deeper, more symbolic, more spiritual. He believed in the power of dreams, archetypes, the collective unconscious ideas that Freud saw as mystical, even dangerous. Jung could have stayed silent. He could have stayed in Freud's favor, protected his position, and continued receiving praise. But he didn't. Instead, he chose truth. He chose to follow his inner voice, even when it went against the most powerful figure in his field, even when it meant stepping away from everything he had built. And it cost him. When Jung finally broke ties with Freud, the backlash was swift and harsh. He was ridiculed, isolated, cut off from the psychoanalytic community. For a time, he even entered a psychological crisis, what he would later call his confrontation with the unconscious. But that confrontation changed everything. Instead of breaking him, it awakened him. In solitude, Jung dove deep into the study of myths, symbols, ancient texts, alchemy, and his own dreams. He began mapping the very landscape of the human soul. It was during this period that he developed many of the groundbreaking ideas we've explored: the persona, the shadow, individuation, psychological types. All of it born not just from theory, but from experience. Jung's break from Freud wasn't just a disagreement, it was a spiritual rite of passage, a moment where he chose integrity over approval. He let go of external validation to follow an inner truth. And by doing so, he became one of the most original thinkers of the 20th century. His journey is a reminder that sometimes, in order to become who you truly are, you have to walk away from the very things that once gave you identity: a job, a relationship, a belief, a version of yourself. The question is, will you have the courage to do the same when the time comes? Because make no mistake, it will come. There will be a moment where staying true to yourself will mean disappointing someone else, where living in alignment will mean breaking away from what's familiar. And in that moment, you'll face a choice to stay safe or to be real, to seek approval or to seek truth. But how do you prepare for that? How do you build the strength to walk away from the roles you've outgrown and into a life that actually feels like your own? That's what we'll explore in the final part. We'll talk about what it looks like to live with radical authenticity, not just in theory, but in practice. Because awareness is only the beginning. Real freedom takes action. Living authentically, letting go of the need for approval. We've come a long way. You've seen how the need for approval quietly shapes your choices, how the persona becomes a mask you forget you're wearing, how the shadow hides the parts of you you've never dared to face, and how even Carl Jung himself had to walk away from comfort, recognition, and status to follow something deeper. Now the question becomes simple but life-changing. Are you ready to be who you truly are? Because if you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just about psychology. It's about your life. Maybe for the first time, you're beginning to see how much of your identity was built for other people. The way you dress, the way you speak, The way you hold back, tone yourself down, or overcompensate just to stay liked. It's not your fault. We've all been conditioned to seek acceptance. We were taught that love is something you earn by being good, pleasant, perfect, or useful. But now that you see the trap, you have a choice. You can stop playing the role. That doesn't mean becoming defiant, cold, or selfish. It means becoming honest. It means being kind without betraying your truth. It means letting people see you even when you're messy, even when you're not agreeable, even when it might cost you approval. Because here's the truth that no one teaches you. Authenticity will sometimes cost you relationships, but it will never cost you yourself. And that's a trade worth making. So how do you begin? Start small. Start by noticing. Where do you say yes when you mean no? Where do you stay silent just to avoid a reaction? Where do you shrink to stay accepted? Just noticing those moments is already an act of freedom. Then begin to act. Say the honest thing even if your voice shakes. Set a boundary even if it disappoints someone. Let yourself be seen even if you're afraid of judgment. You don't have to do it all at once, but you do have to start. Because here's what no one tells you. The more you live in truth, the less you fear rejection. Not because people stop judging, but because you stop needing their approval to feel whole. You become your own source of validation. You begin to belong to yourself. Yes, the old patterns will come back. You'll still feel the pull to please, to perform, to play it safe. But now, you'll be aware. And that awareness gives you power. You'll catch yourself. You'll choose differently. You'll keep coming home to your truth. That's the real meaning of freedom, not the absence of judgment, but the presence of self. So here's your invitation. Stop asking, will they like me? Start asking, do I like who I become around them? Stop asking, am I accepted? Start asking, am I honest? Stop asking, how can I fit in? Start asking, how can I show up as myself? Because the world doesn't need more polished masks. It needs more real humans, raw, honest, evolving. And if you're here reading this, it means something in you is ready, not to become someone new, but to finally become yourself. One step, one truth, one choice at a time.